This is Access Ann Arbor.
Welcome to Access Ann Arbor. My name is Sandy Hang, president of Ann Arbor Woman's Farm and Garden. We're here to tell you about an iconic Ann Arbor tradition coming up June 13th and 14th. Now, this is a special year for Garden Walk, the Silver Jubilee. We will be celebrating 25 years of this Ann Arbor tradition right here this year. 2 years ago, we started thinking about how do we commemorate the occasion. You know, after all, 25 years is a long time to sustain an event that has supported dozens of horticulture and educational and beautification projects around Ann Arbor and the entire Washtenaw County. So we came up with the idea of a juried event, selecting the best of the best private gardens and gardeners of the last 24 years. A team of farm and garden members did a lot of legwork and deliberations to come up with the finalists for the 25th anniversary. So joining me now to talk about this event are my fellow farm and garden members. We'll be talking about the fundraising, we'll be talking and seeing a sneak peek of the gardens, and we'll be talking about the history. So first, let me introduce you to Cindy Fink. Cindy Fink is a landscape architect, a master gardener, and she's the director of our garden education for Garden Walk this year. And sitting next to her is our treasurer, Nancy Lynch, and Nancy was an integral part of our foundation committee, and the foundation committee looks at all the grant applications, scores the grants, and selects the beneficiaries of the charity, and that's Nancy. And sitting next to Nancy is Diana Samuelson. And Diana is our immediate past president of Farm and Garden, and Diana is also the longest serving member in the studio tonight. And Diana will be sharing a little bit of the history of Farm and Garden and who are these women who put on the Garden Walk. And Diana is also, if you see Diana at Garden Walk, Diana is an avid monarch butterfly person, so ask her about the habitat for the monarch butterfly. And behind the scenes that you can't see, but Lucy Rickert is our Garden Walk co-chair this year, and she is our floor manager here tonight. And in the studio with all of the control room is our executive producer, and that's Carrie Riedemann. And Carrie is our publicity chair, and she's also a past Garden Walk chair. So we have a lot of Garden Walk information for you tonight. So let's begin with Cindy and taking a sneak peek at some of the gardens that we'll be seeing at the 25th anniversary.
Yes, well, over the years, over 25 years, we've had over 150 gardens on the Garden Walk. And from those, we've chosen 14. As you said, it was a committee that chose the 14. 13 of them are in Ann Arbor, and 1 is in Saline. So this year will be a 2-day event since we have 14. 7 will be shown on one day, and 7 the following day. All of them are private gardens. Most of them were designed by the homeowners, and often they were built by the homeowners. So we will look at 6 of the 14 tonight. We'll give you a sneak peek of 6. The rest of the gardens, you're going to have to come out to the tour to see them. These gardens are very different from one another. They all reflect the owner's interests and personalities, and so you will see that coming out in their garden design and their work. So the first garden we're going to look at is a very large garden. It is on 10 acres of land. It was owned by a nurseryman, and at one time the nursery itself was on the property. He owned the nursery and designed the gardens as display beds for the nursery. In this garden you see stunning rhododendron beds near the house, and of many colors and types. Hopefully they'll be in bloom on the Garden Walk.
Just glorious.
Since everything is running a little later this year in terms of flowering, maybe they will be in bloom. They're laid out in broad strokes. The beds are laid out in broad strokes, and so you see sweeping paths that run past the gardens, so that it's really a strolling garden. And then in the next photo, we see more rhododendrons on the other side of the house. There's also a mix of evergreens blended into the beds. Further away from the house in the woodlands, there are large beds of hostas of many varieties. The owner is an expert, a regional and national expert in the Hosta Society, and there's just so many types.
And I know when people hear his name, and we can't tell the name yet, but they will recognize it as a noted Ann Arborite and landscape designer, and the hostas alone are fabulous.
Yeah, just the hostas are incredible.
Let's look at some more pictures.
Okay. There's another sweeping bed in the next photo. Again, he had 10 acres to work with here, so you can do a lot. There's a Japanese maple featured in this bed and some lilacs, along with all the hostas. In the last photo, I just wanted to point out that this garden took about 30 years to evolve. It took a lot of time. It's really a lifetime achievement for him and his family. Not pictured in any of these pictures is the sun garden, which has a very large pergola and flowering perennials and shrubs for sun. So I just wanted to point out that there is sun gardens too on the property. The second garden is what I think of as an urban farm. It's very different from the first garden, very small and set in the old west side, right in the city of Ann Arbor. There are chickens and bees and vegetables and fruit trees, as well as ornamental shrubs and perennials. The garden is very compact and productive. It has a central lawn in the center, and then the gardens radiate out from that. The beds radiate out around the central lawn. The homeowner is interested in biodynamic gardening, which was developed by Rudolf Steiner in the 20s, where all the parts of the garden work together harmoniously. There is no use of chemicals or pesticides. This garden is very respectful of nature. As a biodynamic garden, the chickens create the fertilizer, which is then used in the garden, and this coop was built by the homeowner and a few of her neighbors. She has about 6 chickens, and they eat the insects and provide eggs for the homeowner. The bees pollinate the flowers and make the honey. It all works together seamlessly. The front yard acts as the pollinator garden, where the plants are selected for their ability to attract butterflies and bees. The house and the grounds are charming and quaint and fit nicely into the old west side. The garden is peaceful and tranquil. It makes you feel removed from the rest of the world. And also of note, this garden was published in Country Garden magazine in 2015 in the early spring issue, if you want to see more pictures. And how can you see these gardens? Well, since this is Silver Jubilee, the garden walk will be different. As I said, it will be a 2-day event on June 13th and 14th. So you can come out to the walk. The tickets cost $30, and that's for 2 days. And you might think that that's a lot of money, but $30 works out to be about $2 for each garden, which is not a lot. And the other way to look at this is that the money goes to charity. It goes to all kinds of charitable organizations that we're going to talk about in a little bit later in the program. Or you can go to Google and look up Ann Arbor Garden Walk.
And we're the first thing on the Google, aren't we?
I think so, Ann Arbor Garden Walk, and you will see on our website a lot of information, full-length descriptions of each one of the gardens, as well as a list of the retailers who will have tickets for sale. And you can also buy tickets at any one of the gardens. You can just stop by and buy a ticket. And if you want to only go for 1 day, you can do that too.
That's fantastic. And this just came out, this free magazine. You can pick it up at, all kinds of restaurants and businesses in Ann Arbor. But flip Michigan Gardener over to the back page, and it's the beginning of a 5-page article about these gardens. So, and it also has more ticket information if you want to pick it up there.
They interviewed the gardeners.
They interviewed the gardeners and a lot of the tried and true from the gardeners, so that's another resource. Before we look at the rest of the gardens, Cindy, let's talk to Nancy about where all of these monies go. And as I said earlier, Nancy is our treasurer, and she worked on the foundation committee. And the foundation committee looks at all of these grants and scores them, and it's very competitive, where we always have more people wanting money than we can give away. So Nancy, go ahead and tell us a little bit about the foundation and the fundraising.
Sure. So over the past 25 years, the Ann Arbor Women's Farm and Garden has distributed over $500,000 to groups in the community. And as Cindy was saying, the monies raised from ticket sales as well as sponsor contributions is all given directly back to the community through these grants that people have to apply for. Each January we meet as the foundation committee, and we score the grants and we award the monies from the previous year's garden walk. So recently we met to allocate the money from last year's garden walk, and we were happy to be able to fund, at least in part, each of the groups that asked or submitted an application. Now we had over $30,000 requested. We were able to give just about $14,000 this year. And so tonight I am going to take the opportunity to share with the viewers what some of that money is being used for. So the first one that we gave money to that we're going to hear about tonight was Dickin Elementary School for their edible plant garden. PLANT stands for Planting, Learning, and Appreciating Nature's Treasures. Here we see some photos submitted by the school of students in the garden. This is a great project, and teachers incorporate work in the garden into a variety of subjects from math to art. Greenview Pioneer Nature Area is another exciting project that we funded this year. This area is open to the public and is located at the corner of Scioto Church Road and Main Street in Ann Arbor. It was one of the first nature areas in Washtenaw County where native prairie restoration began 20 years ago. We know that when it comes to land management or even gardening, the work never really ends. This year, Greenview Pioneer received monies to replace white oak trees that were lost due to gypsy moth infestation. Additionally, money was given to fund buckthorn removal. Buckthorn is an invasive species of shrub that is choking out many native Michigan plants. The picture on the left on the screen, you can see a buckthorn shrub that is choking out a crabapple. And on the right is a picture after the buckthorn has been removed. So some of the money they used, they have a lot of volunteers that work and help in the area, but they needed to be able to rent a chipper and things like that. That's what some of that money was being used for.
Makes a big difference.
It does make a huge difference. A grant of just over $1,200 was given to Washtenaw County Youth Center. These funds are used to support their community gardens at the center. The gardens there give students the opportunity to grow vegetables, to feel a sense of accomplishment in growing and cooking fresh produce. The monies used this year are going to be used in part to construct a serenity garden designed to offer a quiet place for residents to meditate and work through some of the life issues that they're facing. Another big beneficiary this year is Matthaei Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. You may have heard that they are doing a lot of work at Nichols, replacing dead and damaged plants, identifying and moving some of the peonies, which as you can see in the picture there. Avalon Housing is a nonprofit group that manages permanent supportive housing for individuals who are homeless or who have mental or physical disabilities. Currently, over 400 tenants are served, including more than 90 families with children. The edible Avalon Gardens provide fresh food that is accessible to tenants, and volunteers teach skills related to growing, preparing, and preserving food. Ann Arbor Farm and Garden is also helping to fund a wildlife garden that's going to be installed at the Leslie Science Center this year. And over the years, we've supported many other groups that our viewers will be familiar with, including Ann Arbor Hospice, Cobblestone Farms, Habitat for Humanity, and 4-H. We also historically fund a scholarship, or several scholarships, to students at U of M through the School of Natural Resources and Environment, and we also generally give money to the U of M Biostation every year.
And we've only touched the surface
Oh,
of the
absolutely.
organizations over the years that have received grants from Farm and Garden.
Yes, recently, and for our 100th anniversary, they compiled a list of all of the groups that had received funds over the years, and it was very lengthy, which that is also available on the website for people to look at, to really get an idea of the scope of what your ticket contributions go towards. And it really does all go back to the community, which is a nice thing.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned that Farm and Garden is 100 years old last year, and a lot of notables like Clara Ford was one of our national presidents. We have quite a history. And before we talk to Diana about the history of Farm and Garden, I just want to go back to Cindy for a moment to have another little sneak peek, because education is a big piece of Garden Walk. And we have a very strong educational component this year.
This year, yeah, we're trying to do it a little differently because it is the Silver Jubilee. So we're having Washtenaw County Master Gardeners at every garden, as well as the homeowners, to answer questions and for people to learn a little bit about gardening practices. So yeah, usually the garden owners themselves are there, and most of them will be there, but it's nice to have even more people on site to answer questions. So the next garden we're going to look at is a lovely example of how to use garden structures in the garden, such as arbors and pergolas, to help connect the house with the garden. Most of the arbors in this garden were designed and built by the homeowners. Again, they did the work themselves. So in this photograph, we see these paths. The paths go to all different parts of the garden. In this one, there's the tumbled bluestone pathway, which is lined with hosta and other shade-loving plants. We can see, we can see the path, but we don't see the destination, so that adds a little bit of mystery and magic. And in this picture, you see the direct connection between the indoors and the outdoors. You just step out of the house and you're immediately in the garden. There's a real direct connection.
Someone was doing a lot of thinking about the views from inside and outside in this garden.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when the homeowner first bought this house, she said that she went to each window and looked outside and tried to decide what views she wanted to enhance, what views she wanted to work with. That was one of the first things she did in developing the garden.
What a great idea.
Yeah. Here you get a sense of the buildings, the arbors, and the garden parts and how they all work together and flow into one another harmoniously. One of the buildings is their art studio. And here you can see in the photograph a little
bunny,
ceramic bunny in the distance. I want to say that the homeowners are ceramic artists themselves, and they're going to be selling their work during the garden walk. And there are several local and regional artists showing their work at several of the gardens. The artists were juried and selected and include mostly garden art, such as handcrafted glass and pottery, garden sculpture, and garden furniture. The artists have agreed to donate 25% of their proceeds back to the garden walk. There are about 10 different artists throughout the gardens this year. And at our website, you can see more information about the artists and their work. Okay, this garden is a fascinating garden. It was designed by the homeowner, who is the president of the Rock Garden Society and a professor of botany at the U. It's a special treat to see his interest in creating very specific microclimates to grow very special plants. Here we see what's called a tuffa rock garden, and you can see a small fern and some other fairly exotic plants that require just a very specific microclimate. In the next photo, you see azaleas and rhododendron beds near the house, where he's created beds with acidic soil so that these types of plants can grow. There are many winding paths that work through this garden. It was built in terraces and it backs up to a very steep slope. Some of the paths are difficult to walk on. Some have a lot of stairs, but you don't need to go up all of those to appreciate the garden. And this last picture of the garden shows a crevice garden, a limestone crevice garden, where
that is really interesting.
Very unique plants can grow in the crevices where water collects and there's just a little bit of dirt, and they like to grow in that environment. There's also sunny areas where there's cacti, hardy for this region. It's a truly unique garden. It has an otherworldly feeling to it. You can see plants here that you wouldn't see anywhere else in Ann Arbor.
So it's a very special garden.
Yeah.
And I've promised that we're going to talk about the history, Cindy, so let's talk to Diana Samuelson about what brings us all together who puts this on anyway? People think it's different groups. But Diana, I was hoping you could give us a little history and information about Farm and Garden. And as I said, Diana is our immediate past president and the longest serving member here tonight, so who better to tell us about this than Diana?
Well, Sandy, Ann Arbor Women's Farm and Garden is part of a larger national organization, of philanthropic organization. The group just had their 100th anniversary, and the Ann Arbor branch itself has celebrated over 70 years.
That's a long time.
It is a long time. Our members are people who share a common interest in horticulture and the environment. We educate ourselves on these topics through programs at our monthly meetings, and we give financial support to individuals and organizations through scholarships and grants. We're also well known for our Greens Market fundraiser that continued for over 61 years until we decided to focus all our energies on the garden walk. Our fascinating meeting topics range from sustainable landscaping to wild bees and pollinators. We might have a slideshow on International Gardens one month and instructions on creating a rain garden with native plants the next. Our meetings are also a time to stay current with the business of the club, socialize with friends, and catch up on committee work. And we really get to know each other through volunteering on our committees. A long-standing committee, over 50 years now, is our horticultural therapy group we call the Flower Ladies. This dedicated group of women meet at Mott Children's Hospital to create flower arrangements with patients and their families. They bring a bit of brightness to a dark time, and everyone leaves with a smile. The flowers are donated by generous area businesses. Our other major committee plans and carries off this annual garden walk, our primary fundraiser. This enthusiastic group works year-round to identify interesting gardens, to plant publicity, posters and tickets, and to schedule workers. It takes every member, Sandy, to staff this popular event.
And we are always welcoming new members. Yes. And we've talked a lot about, several of us are hands-on gardeners, like those of us here tonight, but we also have members who belong, they don't like to garden, but they belong because they appreciate and they support our parks and the horticultural beauty of Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor Women's Farm and Branch founder was Mildred Matthaei, aka Matthaei Botanical Gardens, and you guessed it, she was part of that. And another member, Emily Leslie, and her husband donated the land for Leslie Science Center. So our members over the years have been very active in the Ann Arbor community with horticulture and beautification projects. We have time to look at just a couple more gardens, so let's go back to Cindy and let's preview the last two gardens that we have, Cindy.
All right. The fifth garden we're going to look at today was designed by the homeowner, who's the director of Matthaei Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. This garden is an example of an urban wildlife retreat, using mostly native plants and set in the city on a relatively small lot. It's full of environmentally friendly or green gardening practices. Here we see a beautifully designed rain garden. Most of the plants are natives, so you can see what can be done with native plants that attract wildlife and are hardy for this region. The owner said recently that he's owned a lawnmower for 26 years, and he hasn't owned a lawnmower for 26 years, hasn't had to use it since he developed this garden. Another environmentally friendly feature is this roof garden, a green roof garden, and not shown are vegetable beds, which are integrated into the landscape along the driveway.
Is that a gnome? That was a gnome. Yes.
There's a gnome in the corner
there,
yes.
He's got a sense of humor.
Yeah. While the garden is environmentally responsible, it's also lovely. The native plants offer color and textural contrast throughout the seasons and provide privacy from the street and the neighbors. And in this last photo of his garden, we see a rainwater collector and a little bit of paving. For the paving, the homeowner wanted to use porous paving so that the water would run through and soak into the ground rather than running off and going into the stormwater system. This is a great garden to learn about good gardening practices, good green gardening practices, and to see a lovely native plant garden that's beneficial for wildlife and for the environment. Okay, the final garden we're going to look at today is a lovely expression of a gardening addict's addiction to gardening.
Look at that color.
Yeah.
Oh,
It has over 100 varieties of perennials, beautiful specimen trees and shrubs, and a huge, sunny, formal herb garden. There are many beautiful plant combinations to admire within this garden. In the next slide, you see an example. You see clematis on the left, which is in bloom, and lamb's ear, which is the silver color in the middle, and the dwarf ninebark, which is the dark burgundy, just to name a few. It's delightful for all your senses. There's something fragrant, something fun to touch, and all these beautiful views and combinations of plants. It's designed so that there's always something blooming. Here we see daylilies, lamb's ear, and garden phlox mixed nicely with evergreen shrubs and a strong evergreen backdrop. It was developed over many years, and now the new homeowners have decided to keep up and even expand this extensive garden.
now I heard the backstory on this. They bought the house and had no idea.
They
In
had
the
no
winter,
idea.
they had no idea this garden was there.
Right. They bought it in March, and they closed in May. When they bought it in March, it was snow-covered. In May, all these plants started to come up. And so the new homeowners were shocked. And the old homeowner was shocked that she had sold her garden to someone who didn't know anything about plants. So it was quite a surprise for both of them.
But they love it now.
But they love it, and they're keeping it up, and they're trying to continue, learn about gardening, and I think they're even going to expand in certain areas.
They're
so.
becoming gardeners.
Yeah, they're
fantastic.
becoming gardeners, right. Let's see, I think we have another photo of the paver path, which leads past the deck and then eventually to an herb garden through a wooden arbor. So there's the path and the herb garden that you walk past, and then you eventually get to a vegetable garden, and that's surrounded by a handmade black metal fence, which is really lovely. So there are many trees on this site. This is a crabapple in bloom. But the first step taken by the homeowner to develop the garden was to plant, I think she said she planted 50 white pine around the garden and through the garden to try to define spaces and create evergreen backdrops for these views she wanted to create. So this garden is on Textile Road in Saline. It's the only one that's outside of Ann Arbor, but it's worth the drive to see. So these are just a few of the many gardens that are on the tour on June 13th and 14th. So we should remember that these are all private gardens. You may not have an opportunity to see these again, and they all represent a great opportunity to learn a lot about gardening and to see beautiful gardens.
Thanks, Cindy. And thanks to Diana, and thanks to Nancy, and behind the scenes Lucy Rickert and Carrie Riedemann, who's in the studio. And thanks to all of you for taking time to watch this. And we hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit about Ann Arbor Farm and Garden and the education and horticultural beautification projects we volunteer to support. We also want to tell you a little bit to remind you that it's June 13th and 14th. It's a special two-day event this year. 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. Half are open on one day, half will be open the next day. These are private gardens again. They'll be open just for these days. We want to thank the businesses and all of the people who financially support Garden Walk, and the patrons of art and beauty in our community who support this. They may not garden themselves, but they believe in our parks, they believe in supporting programs for our schools, and that's what this is all about. So thanks to all of you for making Ann Arbor a wonderful place to live, and thank you for being part of Garden Walk the last 24 years. We sure hope that you will be part of Garden Walk again for the 25th anniversary this year. We hope to see you on June 13th and 14th. And just so you know, everyone is welcome, even children. No strollers though, and you're welcome to take pictures. No tripods. We'll see you the 13th and 14th.